Welcome to our viewers here in Vermont, in the United States, and around the world. I am Benjy Renton reporting to you live from Middlebury, Vermont. It is Election Day in America, continued as a nation waits on edge for the results of the presidential election. Today, we're going to look at some of the results in the Vermont races for statewide as well as county offices, and then we're going to take a little bit of a look at where we stand now on the road to 270. So first, let us start off with the Vermont races. I'm going to share my screen. You're going to be able to see some of the data that we have for all 275 districts that have been called in the state right now. So let's take a look. Hold on one second, and we're going to look first at the federal electoral votes in Vermont. Here we go. So no surprise here, Joe Biden won Vermont's 3 electoral votes by a fair margin against President Donald Trump. And Peter Welch here, as our one representative to Congress, won his election in a landslide. That race was called by the AP quite early. Let's take a look a little bit at kind of the electoral map for the presidency in Vermont. Some of those towns in the Northeast really picking up those Republican strongholds over there. One town, the town of Ira down there near Rutland, actually scoring a tie where both Donald Trump and Joe Biden scored the exact same amount of votes. And you can see also Joe Biden picking up the rest of the state. For representative to Congress, slightly different. Peter Welch winning almost all towns in Vermont. His Republican challenger, Miriam Berry, only winning a handful of towns up in the northeast part of the state. Now let's take a little bit of a look at the statewide races. All these races have been called. We're just looking over the results. I just want to emphasize that these results are unofficial until verified by the Secretary of State about 1 to 2 days after the election. So here we have the governor of Vermont, Republican incumbent Phil Scott, scoring a sizable victory here against David Zuckerman, 248,000 votes. On the lieutenant governor, which was a tense race, we're going to take a look a little bit at the pre-electoral polling that we saw in the state and kind of compare that to some of the results that we saw. But Molly Gray, the Democrat, being Vermont's 4th female lieutenant governor, edging out Scott Mill 182,000 votes to 156,000 votes. State Treasurer, Democrat Beth Pierce, winning her re-election bid here with 197 votes. Secretary of State Jim Condos, also an incumbent, winning 212,000 votes. Auditor of Accounts Doug Hoffer, the incumbent, winning 266,000 votes. And Attorney General T.J. Donovan wins his re-election with 233,000 votes. Let's take a little bit of a look at some of this polling data that we saw yesterday. I showed it in the 9 o'clock broadcast, which was our first of 4 on the night. You can watch them all on this YouTube channel. You can watch all the back broadcasts if you would like to see. This is the Republican polling, the gubernatorial race polling data by VPR and Vermont PBS from September. You can see that Phil Scott actually outperformed the polls that we have. And essentially what happens is all those other votes, whether people indicated on the poll that they're not voting or that they're voting for a different candidate, he basically scored most of those votes, leaving Dave Zuckerman with a slight portion of the votes. Lieutenant governor's race was always one of Vermont's more hotly contested races this election season. Scott Milne obviously winning the Republican vote here, but Molly Gray kind of edging out Milne in a lot of the other categories. This is actually quite an interesting map. We're going to take a look at Phil Scott's. This was his biggest electoral victory this year. He won 67% of the state to his 3rd term in office. In 2018, he won 54% of the state. And in 2016, he won 52% of the state. This is the electoral map of percentage of support for Phil Scott in 2016, as you can see here. Let's flip that over to 2018. Slightly darker, slightly more support, especially in the northern areas of St. Albans and areas like that. And now kind of gathering that support in central and eastern Vermont. So it's really interesting. I think Vermont has some really intriguing town level data, and we're really grateful to the Secretary of State for giving us these data so we can analyze it and look at some of the trends as we see here. Let's take a look at a heat map of this year's gubernatorial elections for Vermont governor. Phil Scott, as we've seen in the previous slides, he has scored a victory in almost all towns. David Zuckerman scoring a couple towns there in the southern part of the state. But really in the top right, in the northeast part of the state, as you can see on your screen there, Phil Scott picking up those votes in Republican strongholds, but also in St. Albans. And this is actually really interesting because if we compare that to the Democratic Results for president, a lot of towns you'll see a majority vote for Joe Biden, but then Phil Scott, a Republican, for governor. A notable development in the race was that Scott supported Joe Biden as he announced yesterday after he voted in Berlin. Let's take a little bit of a look here at the lieutenant governor race. Molly Gray securing some votes in a progressive stronghold of Burlington and some other votes in the eastern part of the state. Scott Milne, as we've seen before, really scoring some votes in the top right in that Northeast Kingdom area. Now we're going to take a little bit of a look at the Addison County races. Incumbent state senators Christopher Bray and Ruth Hardy, both Democrats, cruising their way to victory, defeating the next Republican challenger Peter Briggs, John Cristiano, and Archie Flower. For state representative, Amy Sheldon and Robin Scheid also scoring their ways to victory there. And a new race, Dave Silberman has won his election to High Bailiff with 10,486 votes. This is another map that you can see here. Obviously, you vote for two candidates for Vermont State Senate, but this map shows the candidate with the most votes. Peter Briggs scoring some of those victories in the western parts of Addison County. Ruth Hardy scoring the town of Middlebury and other towns there, East Middlebury, where she is from, and Christopher Bray winning his own town of New Haven, as well as some other towns in the northeastern part of the county. Let's take a look at a special race that we're watching this year. For coverage on all these races, you can go to middleburycampus.com to look at our amazing election issue. Last week, we published a lot of different profiles and other different coverage on these different races. Washington County High Bailiff race was a particularly interesting race to us because we do have a Middlebury student, Asa Skinder, class of 22.5, who scored the write-in vote and was on the Democratic ticket for High Bailiff in the area. He won against his Republican challenger, Mark Poulin, 17,000 votes for Skinder and 13,000 votes for Poulin. Let's also look at voter turnout because I think this is really interesting. Vermont's voter turnout was the highest ever in elections, currently at a 70.7% turnout, according to these latest numbers from Secretary of State's high turnout level here in the north and the western part of the state, slightly lower up in the parts of Caledonia County and Essex County, getting into the Northeast Kingdom. Before we go on to the federal electoral votes, I wanted to take a look at some other maps that we can look at through our colleagues here at VT Digger. And we're going to look at some interesting trends, especially in regards to mail-in ballots. I'd like to give my props to Aaron Patenko and James Finn, my colleagues at VT Digger, for putting these maps together. This is actually really interesting. It's showing the percentage of mail-in votes by town. And you can see that Burlington, Shelburne, a lot of these towns, progressive strongholds up in the north, really having a huge portion of mail-in ballots, whereas Poultney, Rutland, all these towns here, slightly less so. This is a really interesting scatter plot that we have here, showing that more conservative towns were less likely to vote by mail. And so the more people voted for Trump in town, the fewer people chose to vote by mail rather in person. This is a common trend that we've seen against, voting by mail this year is quite a partisan issue, and we've seen this in other states, but it's really interesting to have those data for the 255 towns that we see here in Vermont, and you can see quite a strong correlation by that trend line here. Final map here on VT Digger, turnout rate is similar to what we've seen before. We just looked at high turnout here in the western part of the state and slightly lower turnout down in the southeast. So there's where we have, and there's where things stand for the Vermont races. We're now going to look at where we stand nationally, and we're going to take a look first at the Senate, and then we'll finish off with our 270 to win electoral map for the White House. Let's take a look at our Senate race. Over here, we have races that were called last night. Tommy Tuberville, a Republican from Alabama, flipping that Democratic seat held by Doug Jones. Two Democratic flips here, Mark Kelly winning against Martha McSally, and Colorado, John Hickenlooper unseating incumbent Republican Cory Gardner. A couple other notable Senate races that were called today. Gary Peters has won re-election, a Democrat, to Senate in Michigan, and Susan Collins, in a tightly fought battle, won re-election to her Republican Senate seat up in Maine. Now let's take a look at the presidency. This is our 270 to win electoral map. We have outstanding vote counts waiting from Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada are the 4 states that we are watching this electoral season as the election comes to an end. 2 major calls that we've seen today were the state of Wisconsin and the state of Michigan, both Biden calls, according to AP. And so let's take a look at these 4 states, and we're going to do a little bit of a simulation here. We are assuming currently that Biden is up in Nevada and Arizona, so let's put those in here. With that, we have 270. Biden would win the presidency. Now, let's assume that we can take Arizona out, and we'll potentially put Pennsylvania in. That's also another option for the presidency. Also putting Georgia in, another option. Let's take out Nevada for a second. We'll put in back Arizona, and then we'll have 264 electoral votes. Winning Pennsylvania, winning Nevada would get you to 270, winning Georgia, all of those. So we need 2 of those 4 states to go to Biden. I'm going to show you a brief modeling exercise that we did with our team here to show you essentially what we're looking at as votes come in. 2 important vote deadlines that we see here. Fulton County in Georgia, where Atlanta is expecting to report more votes and an update to their votes at midnight Eastern time tonight. And some remaining votes from Maricopa County in Arizona. We're trying to see if Biden's lead can increase through those votes in Maricopa County. Those are coming in at 12:30 a.m. on the East Coast. Let's take a look one more time at this 270 win electoral map. This is the most recent version published by the New York Times. And let's take a look at these modeling data that we have here. We calculated, according to data about 10 minutes ago, as we've seen that Biden is down in both Georgia and Pennsylvania. We are looking at some of the percentage of the remaining votes that Biden needs to win both of those states. So let's first take a look at Georgia. Trump is up here by just under 100,000 votes over here, with 95% of the vote reporting. Total votes expected are just over 5 million. We have about 253,000 remaining ballots, and Biden needs 146,000 of them, which would mean about 57% of that remaining vote that Biden needs. Let's take a look at Pennsylvania, which is an interesting numbers that we have over here. With 88% reporting, Trump is up by about 200,000 votes. But let's look at those remaining votes. We still have 847 remaining votes in Philadelphia and other counties, Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is. Biden needs 517,000 of those votes, which the percentage of those votes that he needs to win that state of Pennsylvania is 61%. We do have an update on the latest mail-in statistics so far. According to CNN, Pennsylvania mail-in ballots have gone 78% for Biden and just over 20% for Trump so far. So there is cause for optimism over there. Let's take a look at Pennsylvania right now. Similar statistics reported here from CNN. A key race alert, about 800,000 uncounted votes. Biden needs 61% of those. Trump needs between 36 and 38% of those. So that is where we stand at the presidency and at the road to 270. And we will be monitoring these trends throughout the night. If it's necessary, we may do another live broadcast. So you can follow me on Twitter at BH Renton to see all the updates and to see notices of any kind of paths or any states that are being called that are critical for either former Vice President Biden or President Donald Trump to win the presidency. It's going to be an exciting night. It's possible that these totals, especially in Nevada, as they've stopped reporting for the night, it's possible that these votes will not be counted until tomorrow, and we may have a winner by tomorrow, either morning or mid-morning, depending on the time zones of the West Coast, depending on how long those votes take to report, and those races will be called. So stay tuned, hang in there, and have a great night.